We're ready. Steve, you can go to Facebook. Good morning, New Haven, and welcome to WNHH Radio's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to join me on an exploration of what makes the Elm City tick. And it's One City Thursday, folks, our weekly dive into the emerging network of neighborhood management teams coming together this summer to build a united New Haven. Today, we have leaders of the neighborhood where the idea started and the work started getting done, Newhallville. Let's give a big WNHH welcome to Kim Harris, chair of the Newhallville Community Management Team, and Newhallville's Alders, Delphine Clyburn, Kim Edwards, and Steve Winter. Thanks for coming in, everybody. How great to have the Power Trust right here in one. Boy, nothing bad better happen here because Newhallville will be in trouble, right? We got to make sure that we get you out here in one piece.
Bite your tongue, Paul.
And we'll treat each other gently. It'll be all right. Thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. Hey, I think it's actually a very interesting week to have you folks in here because a lot of folks in Newhallville, about 100 people, went to Community Baptist Church the other night to bid farewell to a woman who I would say blazed the trail that you folks are now walking. It was the funeral for Lillian Brown. She was 100 years old. She was pretty, to the end, she had a lot of that oomph. And she was a pioneer of political activism and involvement in Newhallville. She had some official positions like town committee and city commissions, but I think it was more her unofficial role as like she was on the porch where anyone who wanted to be mayor knew they had to sit to know what's going on in Newhallville. She was the one who fired up people to speak up for themselves in a neighborhood that traditionally had very little say downtown. As a mother, she groomed three of the women who made a big difference in this city, still continue to. Diane X. Brown, the librarian at Stetson, Sally Brown, the former city clerk, and Carol Brown, who's not around anymore, but was prominent attorney in town. So, she really had the idea that women should make a difference and speak up, that people know Hallville. And she was called a mother for the whole neighborhood. Were any of you folks at that funeral?
I was at the funeral.
You were at the funeral. And what was it like in your opinion? Like, what'd you take from it?
It was an incredibly beautiful, graceful service. It really was. The people who spoke, the official commendations from the city, from the Board of Alders that Alder Edwards wrote, the musical and vocal performances. She really left her mark in composing that service. It was really beautiful.
Julianne Guest waves hello on Facebook. Hello, Julianne. Thanks for listening. So, Delphine and Kim, nowadays, and there didn't even used to be females, and not even originally African Americans in some of these positions. And now you're an African American woman, Delphine, you're an African American woman. How do you see what you're able to do now in light of what Lillian Brown was up against half a century ago, 20 years ago? Any thoughts on that?
Yes. I never forget when we first became Alders, Jeanette Morrison, Brenda Foskey, Cyrus Hill, myself, we went to sit and talk with Miss Brown. And she was saying to us, make sure we take care of Newhallville and make sure that the Q House come back.
All right, and the Q House is happening.
She said that to us, and stay true to ourselves. So I really appreciate that talk that we had with her, and I'm staying true to myself and to the people that we serve. We have brought a lot of activities for our area, cleanup. We have turned it around over the years. It takes time, but we have been doing that.
It's good you brought that up because I'm thinking of Lurin Carter. What used to be called the Mud Hole 20 years ago is now a place where people share foods and clothing and learn to ride bikes and just do all sorts of great stuff. And it's a place that used to be a problem here in the city. But I'm also thinking of the way Newhallville is seen in Lillian Brown's day and the way it's seen today. I mean, until as recently as the 80s and 90s, that was kind of the rebel neighborhood politically. The idea was that nobody listened to Newhallville and you were fighting. So as Chuck Allen, Josh Moore, Willie Green, I'm thinking of people who sometimes they're fighting each other. Sally Brown was an Alder because they weren't getting heard downtown. So they'd fight for stuff, and then downtown would get mad, and they would put up people to have primaries against each other. It was hilarious that every 2 years you never knew who was fighting each other with each other. Like Chuck Allen and Sally Brown would be like tearing down each other's posters to run for Alder one year, and then uniting against someone else the next. Chuck Allen and Willie Green would be fighting to knock out people, and then they'd get knocked out 2 years later. And I always kind of felt like this was a fight over crumbs. And now when I look at political campaigns, I see something very different. I see the governor feeling he has to walk through Newhallville with Delphine Clyburn when he was running last time because some of the highest voting, it used to be some of the lowest voting totals in the city. And now some of the highest voting totals take place. I think that's partly a tribute to Delphine not letting people get away with not voting. But I mean, I remember Chris Murphy running for Senate told me his first time he came to Lincoln Bassett School in Newhallville and he saw people lined up around the block at 6 o'clock and he knew he won because he knew what an important area that was. And I know when Toni Harp campaigned for office, she felt important to emphasize Newhallville. When she makes decisions, she puts people on the commissions. Am I reading it right? Like Kim Edwards, you would see this. You grew up in a household where this was all happening. Your mother was an Alder, Elfrida Edwards. You're a first-term Alder, but you know you used to be you've been a union steward. You've been in the mix. Am I right from the outside, or is Newhallville still kind of getting second-class treatment from the city at whole?
We won't let it be treated as a second-class city, or we won't be treated as if we don't count.
Mm-hmm. And please get close to the mic.
And my memories of Mother Brown were as a little child, walking down the streets with my mother, coming from meetings with Chuck Allen, Sally Brown, as part of the Newhallville Neighborhood Corporation back in the day. We used to walk through, we used to cut through the mud hole, the undesirable areas where we had crime, and now it's the learning corridors and stuff. And there was always that fight where we want our voices heard. We will be heard. It may take time. We may have to build it up and get everyone in order and lined up so we are aligned and we have one voice. And I see us as that now.
And what about women in city politics and in Newhallville politics? There always were some women. Your mother was one of them, right? She was involved for many years. You had Brenda Fuskis and before her, Joanne Pearson. But it was mostly the men.
Yes.
And some very good men. Bill Dyson, he made a real difference.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have a female mayor whose Senate district included Newhallville. You have a lot of women on the Board of Alders, including the Board of Alders President, Taisha Walker,
Mm-hmm.
and Jeanette Morrison plays a leading role. How do you feel your role as a woman, your opportunities compare to those your mother had as an Alder all those years, Kim?
I think she started at a different time where women did have to fight for a lot more. We're still fighting, but we are a force to be reckoned with, and everyone sees that now. We're strong. We're powerful. We don't mind standing out, being heard, and fighting for what we need to fight for.
Now, what are you fighting for these days, Kim?
I fight for justice every day. And when I say justice, whether it's income, whether it's jobs, whether it's street cleaning, getting our pedestrian safety right, everything is a fight.
Mm-hmm.
And I have Steve, I have Miss Delphine. We meet, we come together, and we have to work on things jointly. We don't do it officially all the time because, we have our Board of Alders meetings. I will text Steve, I will call Miss Delphine, and we stay in touch because we're neighbors.
So is there sort of a united Newhallville Alder team here?
I say we are. And if one doesn't know about something that the other knows about, they will know about it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to keep in touch. If I have one side of the street and Steve has the other, we have to collaborate.
It always cracks me up how they give me one block and there's two different Alders
That's how
represent
it
different
is.
parts. And then Steve, of course, that's one of those snaking gerrymandered districts.
It is
Like Ward 8 and Ward 27. Like you need a compass and a magnifying glass and like five wise men to know where you are and where you're not in that ward.
And it's true, because I just said to Miss Delphine before we went on air, I said, Miss Delphine, Winchester, near Huntington, my side, your
My
side.
side.
It is so funny because you're doing things. I'm like, we got to talk after this, and then I'm like, Steve, we got Canner Street, we got Division Street. He came up to me, we were talking about Division Street. It's something on my side. And then I had to
What's
call
going
him.
on Division Street?
Well, we have to beautify it. We have to get some trees taken down. We have some properties over there that just need to be straightened out a little bit.
And which properties in
maintained.
specific?
I'm also specifically right now, I'm working on 55 Division Street.
And which building
That's
is that?
across from Science Park. It's like a vacant lot right now.
Okay.
But we're trying to get some things done there.
That's next to those condos that were built in the 90s. Remember those? How are those doing?
The ones down the street,
Mhm.
that's
Going down toward the Newhallville side. Yeah.
those are doing well. That's
Mhm.
not me though, but those are doing very well.
That's me.
How are those doing, Steve? So you're hopping and skipping over her property back to her property, yeah. And what's going on? So there's a vacant lot of 55, and what's going to go on there? What are you looking for?
Well, that's what we're doing. We're trying to have talks and plan it out. We want to make sure it's something that is conducive to the neighborhood. We don't want to just throw anything there. We want to make sure we have a great partnership.
Who
because
owns the lot?
That's actually a housing authority lot.
Okay.
So there's only certain things that can kind of go there, but we're not just going to let people
Well, lots
come.
are getting filled in Newhallville, and that's something else that's different. So we had a lot of vacant land in Newhallville, a lot of years, properties that were abandoned, slumlords, torn down, blighted. Beautiful community gardens came in some of those places. Delphine Clyburn fought to keep those community gardens. And now, especially at the Dixwell end of Newhallville, people are building or planning to build those lots. The three of you have been very busy, and Kim Harris, about discussions for what's now a 400-unit apartment complex, market rate for the most part, not all, coming to the edge of Newhallville and Science Park on Munson Street. Now, what's the latest on that? They got their approvals, but they still got to deal with what the environmental impact of the stuff they're going to be carting away. It used to be a factory, one big part of the old Olin Winchester complex. What's the latest? Last week you had a meeting with the developers. What did you find out?
So the zone change has been approved to a high-density residential 2, which is the most permissive. Really, anything residential related can happen there. And what the developer has proposed along Munson, which I think everyone's really excited about, is 22 townhomes that will each have their own doorway, place where families can live, be part of the neighborhood.
It's still going to be a gated community, though, right?
Well, so that's what's along Munson, and then this is an enormous parcel. It's 13 acres.
And it goes deeper into Newhallville than people were realizing.
Yeah, so it's huge. I've only been on it once, but even when you're inside it, you're looking around. I mean, they just took down a forest there as the beginning of cleaning up this property, and I think that's one concern for me, is that we have something, since it's so big, just physically, that there's a way to try to integrate it into the neighborhood more, so that.
And we always hear developers tell us they're going to do that, but what they find in their interest often is to try not to do that. And you're cutting right along the Farmington Canal, which is a main thoroughfare for the whole public. So what do you think? Are they doing it?
Well, so for me, as of Alder of Ward 21, my ward is split up. There's no other way around it. There is a hill in the middle of my ward, and then after the hill, there is a giant area with a wrought iron fence around it called Science Park. And at least now you can drive through Science Park, but I would like to see gates installed there so that people can actually get through it more easily, get to the businesses inside it more easily. You know, we've got Ricky D's Rib Shack. We've got Concat. They're open 5 days a week from 10 to 2.
And so many events.
The
at
Orchid
night,
Cafe and so many events. I'd like to be able to walk right in there, and I'd like for my.
You can't walk in there?
Well, if I want to get there, I've got to go
Winchester Ave.
up Mansfield, down Division, and then down Winchester. But if
I see. You just don't want those two openings at
there's
the old
just
factory
two, yeah,
gates.
I think all of our neighbors all around it, whether it's on the Newhallville side or the Prospect Hill side, should be able to to access that area more easily.
Now you're going to have this
and connect
400
people more
apartment
easily.
community at the other end of it, the western end.
Right.
Are you going to be able to walk into that? Or are you going to be able to go from the canal trail right into there? Or is there going to be a gate?
We don't know how accessible it'll be at this point. An interesting thing is that there is an old city road, Argyle Street,
Mm-hmm.
which right now connects Dixwell and Shelton.
Mm-hmm.
Teeny tiny little street, but we're looking at some. I think we're all very concerned about traffic calming. We're looking at some traffic calming there, as well as some lighted crosswalks.
What do you want to do with Argyle? Recover more of that street?
Well, so the street actually used to go all the way to Winchester, and so that could be a way to reconnect these two areas and make sure that we have more access to the bike path, more access to all the activity in Science Park, and more integration of our various neighborhoods and various areas.
And Kim Harris, you've been working at integrating neighborhoods on the ground as head of the community management team. What have you seen in these discussions about the 201 Munson Street development that Stephen was just describing? Do you think it's going to be open to the neighborhood? Do you want to see Argyle Street re-extended all the way to Winchester there?
It's really like a mixed bag of tricks happening over there at 201. But I would like to see it a mixed integration of things happening over there. I remember when it was when Argyle was the way there. When we can go straight through it. I actually went over there yesterday just to kind of get a behind-the-scenes look. I went to the marble, the granite company over there.
Elmar, yeah.
Elmar, yes. And I'm like,
And they have the art studio there, right?
yes. I said, because of the One City Initiative, I'm finding all these little nooks and crannies of treasure, gold nuggets that are happening in and around New Haven. And I said, let me go look and let me go talk to the owner and find out what's going on. Doreen and I went. Of course, she had already met the people. She said, come on, Kim, let's go. But I was shocked to see how much property is back there and how this really could be a wonderful connection of things that could happen.
So what we have there is this huge complex that used to build rifles for the nation.
Yes.
Where 18,000 people worked around the clock. Now it got down to 500 to 0. It's been reborn in part as Science Park, housing high-tech companies, just in a few buildings. We have the big new housing complex, upscale housing place there, and but a lot of empty buildings still on property. So I think what you're talking about, rediscovering and reimagining a centerpiece, Newhallville, at the edge of Dixwell, that to have it become something different from what was over 100 years ago.
That's right.
Beginning with a little street called Argyle.
That's right. How about that?
And
How about that?
the other side of the Munson Street projects, we've got the townhomes along Munson, and then behind that there'd be a driveway and some parking lots, some playing fields and basketball courts. But developers told us those will be for the residents of the complex, and then there will be kind of like the Corsair, a really
That's on
enormous
State
building.
Street.
Yeah, so it'll be a 5-story structure where the first floor they've proposed would be parking, but along the bike path there would still be. We really everyone said we want the bike path to be safe. We want eyes on the path, so there will be apartments along the first floor there, not so they won't be looking right at a parking garage. But
Some
then
people, they always think it's better to market a project by saying you're right by a bike path. Some
Sure.
people like to be able to ride their bike everywhere.
Yeah, which for me is sort of strange that there's so much emphasis on parking at the Munson development. They're talking about 400 units and 600 parking spaces,
Whoa.
although they're only required to have
Wow.
400 parking spaces. I would think you'd want to, get
New
people who are
Haven's
saying,
trying to
hey,
go to less parking and more alternative forms of transportation.
yeah. So the main complex there will be 5 stories,
Wow.
about 370 units, and then it'll be more than 3 football fields. That's how big this one building will be. So
Wow.
this giant sort of Corsair-like building, and the renderings they showed us, which are pretty cool.
They are.
Utopia.
Yeah, sort of utopia, but it's within the structure, sort of walls off swimming pools and sort of a cabana style
Wow.
thing.
You think it'll
um,
work, Kim?
I'm
Are people-
hopeful. I'm hopeful
Because we're
that
talking
it
about
will.
market rate, people paying with their bucks.
I'm hopeful that we'll get some affordable housing in there, where some people will get a chance to touch it and see it, who normally wouldn't get
Now,
a chance to.
Delphine and Kim,
Yes.
did you ever think 5 years ago, let alone 20 years ago, that we would be talking about millions of private dollars coming to Newhallville to build huge project like this, more than 3 football fields for people of all incomes, and that instead of arguing about how do we get investment here, we're arguing about how to make sure it works for us. Could you have imagined that just a few years ago?
Well, I know I was desiring for us to have something like this because I knew we followed the project, the Winchester Lofts, and we knew we could not reach that.
$3,000 a month for like 2
So
bedrooms.
I know in myself and Brenda Foskey, Cyrus Hill, and Miss Edwards, our former alder, we desired something greater for us. We believed something else could happen. And when Serena came on, we went to her.
She's the head of the Liverpool City Initiative of the city.
She's a head of LCI. And we said, we want development in this area
Well, you got
and
it now.
affordable housing for our people where they can be a part of this and live, bring up their living. So it happened.
So it's a whole new way of thinking about what Newhallville is and what it can be.
Oh, yes.
And we're talking about that on WNHH-FM's Dateline New Haven at 103.5 FM, live streamed at New Haven in Pendorg. It's One City Thursday, and today we're talking about Newhallville with Management Team Chair Kim Harris and Alders Delphine Clyburn, Steve Winter, and Kim Edwards. Marta Tovskia, I'm sorry, Marta, I butchered your name, but thank you for the wave and listening and posting on Facebook. So you just said something about affordable housing. Newhallville now is finding itself in a position that African-American neighborhoods in Washington, D.C., and all across this country are facing. All of a sudden, neglected neighborhoods that had high concentrations of poverty are getting massive investment of people who want to move in market-rate apartments. Brings new tax revenue, more people to support businesses, but also bringing questions about whose neighborhood it is and how we preserve that affordable housing. Last night at City Hall, we saw the first meeting of a new task force that's going to try to tackle this question. How do we keep affordable housing in New Haven? A lot of ideas on the table. If you were elected supreme ruler of New Haven and you got to tell this task force what to do and what the city would do, how would you go about ensuring that we would keep and promote affordable housing in Newhallville?
That's a big
Making
one.
sure that what is needed for our affordable housing take place, and our involvement of our neighborhood as well, speaking on this, being a part of the ideas on how we do this.
Well, Delphine, you've accomplished that part. Kim Hunter, Delphine, Kim, Steve, you've had people out at every step of this major project on Bunch Street. And another big one now on the boards that's completely affordable housing by Beulah Land Corp. at the old Joe Great property at Munson and Henry and Dixwell.
Those are two pretty different projects. though.
Completely different.
The
One's
Munson
completely
projects,
affordable housing and
right.
one's market rate housing.
Yeah, exactly. The Munson Street project's 90% market rate
Affordable.
housing.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Yeah. So most of it will be market rate, probably in the neighborhood of the Winchester in terms of what they'll cost. And then 10% will be set aside at I think 80% AMI.
Average median income.
Yeah. The Beulah site, they're talking about kind of the opposite, 80% affordable at 50 to 70% of AMI, or maybe even 40 to 60. So, somebody, thank you, somebody, making $18,000 or $20,000 a year could afford to move into that if it were to go forward. I think market rate has to play, a role in building the city's tax base, in lowering, as we've seen all these new projects come down, I think we've seen a slight decline in some of the market rate rents.
That's one thing, part of this is guesswork.
Yeah.
Some people say when you're building these fancy new buildings, you're raising rents on everybody and getting in affordable housing. Other people say if you're building on vacant land, you're not taking away affordable housing. And as Steve just mentioned, the buildings that already exist, the rents will go down because there's now a bigger supply of the market rate. Part of it's a guesswork.
Well,
but then you also have limited control over what people will invest in building. Like we have this moment where people want to invest. What's going to happen if the price of steel goes up with President Trump's trade war? What's going to happen if interest rates go up? Will people still be putting the money down? And how much money can we get from the state? So when we try to put affordable housing into a project like the one that Randy Salvatore is building in the Hill, we need state grants to pay for those. But in Washington, what they're talking about is instead, if somebody wants to come in and make money with a market rate project, you tell them, not government money, but we want you to jack their rents higher on the market rate apartments in order to charge lower rents on a set aside 20 or even, I think one Washington project, 50% affordable housing. Steve, you got something to say on that?
Well, I think you've touched on a whole bunch of different things. One thing is when I talk to folks in my ward on Shelton Avenue, they're very concerned about, hey, we've got this big project coming online. It's great that it's happening in a place where nothing has happened for decades. We're all really excited about that. But yeah, what will the impact be on property values and rents around it? What is gentrification just when somebody moves out and somebody else moves in, or is it also a larger phenomenon where you've got new things coming in that affect the things around them?
But if it's new things coming in, can it benefit or will it hurt the ones that are? What do you think, Kim? What's going to happen on your street when all this stuff gets built? Or you, Delphine?
Oh, when it get built, our area is mostly homeowners anyway. We will keep our homes.
And you're talking about nearer to the Hamden line as opposed to the Munson Street line. Your ward goes up to the Hamden line.
Yeah, my ward go to the Hamden line, but they're homeowners.
Right, and historically it had the highest black home ownership in the city in the 80s, remember 70s and 80s in Newhallville.
So the question was, what would happen to, give me the question
when
again.
This stuff's built for other people coming in, a lot of them have money, but not like the Beulah Project, which would be other people. What's that going to mean for the properties that exist? Is it going to help them? Is the property going to be worth more? Are they going to be able to charge rents that are lower or higher? How's it going to affect people?
I think it would help us. I think it would help us. I think it will coincide together. I think it would help us.
All right.
With it's mostly homeowners. I think it would help our properties, really.
And then,
as
we mentioned earlier, the Farmington Canal, which was an old canal and then railroad that's now this walking trail that takes people all the way up to Wallingford and then into downtown, cuts through Newhallville. Now, I remember when this was built about a decade or more ago, the management team was against it. The management team said, if you do that, people are going to get mugged. And there were some muggings along there. Now it's seen as a real asset, as something that's bringing a lot of people, a lot of free access. And now there's an argument how to make it even better about making a mural with K-Shore Storm. You guys been following that?
Yes, was there yesterday.
What do you think about that mural, and what do you think about, has the trail been a plus for the neighborhood?
Oh, I think I was one that was not sure that it was going to be safe.
Yeah.
And
is it safe?
I believe it is safe. Yeah, I'm on it early in the morning.
And you're organizing, as Doreen is organizing, people to walk on it, bike on it?
Yeah, we walk on it, bike on it every Saturday with our biking program that we have. And we just love it. And I'm hoping that we can even do greater things on the canal and near it.
The two Kims, what's your take on the canal now?
I love the canal. I do understand in the past why people were hesitant, because it was a different time when this first was proposed and opening up officially and different things like that. But I think our city has grown and it has evolved, and our residents have as well. So we're not so worried about crime on the canal line, and because it's built up and it's being used and it's beautified. So when you see something beautiful, you want to keep it beautiful. And the more residents you have using it, the better it is.
No substitute for people being out and owning where they live.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Kim Harris.
I agree. Definitely ditto and ditto. And I think also that change is hard. When we were so used to just a thing, the mud hole, and just the way things were. And sometimes it's hard to have perspective on something that you can't see.
Mm-hmm.
And then when people started talking about it and it actually evolved and people were walking and we saw some biking and people are now talking about, oh, wow, we can do some other things on the sideline here. We could really make action and impact happen right here in our neighborhood.
Yeah, during the trail up in Northampton, there are all these businesses that sell you ice cream and coffee and fix bikes and stuff.
Yes. It's a beautiful thing. And if you ride up, I love the fact that I can get off my bike somewhere in Cheshire and eat pizza, take off the pounds and put them back on. So
and we're doing that on Dateline New Haven and WNHH-FM. We're talking about the view from Newhallville with management team chair Kim Harris and Alders Kim Edwards, Delphine Kleinberg, and Steve Winter. So now Alders play an important role about bringing Newhallville's voice to City Hall when the Board of Alders makes decisions for the whole city. And there are a couple of decisions lately where a couple of you dissented from what the majority of Alders were doing. Just the other night, the city declared a moratorium on converting SRO buildings, single-room occupancy buildings, into market-rate housing for 6 months. Kim, you and Steve voted no on that. It did pass. Why did you vote no?
I voted no because before I was elected alder, I followed the issue with the SROs and the moratorium. I am totally all for affordable housing. We need to get it together. We need our market rate housing. We need our affordable housing so that our residents can continue to live in our city. And we need the market rate for the economic development reasons. However, I'm not convinced on the moratorium piece of it. And I couldn't vote. I just feel like we can't control every little piece. And although I think if the legislation had been there previously where there were provisions on SROs and things were already in place, that would have been fine for me because it's in place, it's there. But I couldn't vote to now put a moratorium because I don't see where we need a moratorium and where that's going to actually solve.
Any. Yeah.
From what I'm hearing and the little research I have done and talking to different constituents, I couldn't go back and put those restrictions on.
And actually, Newhallville knows better than our neighbors about SROs. They're kind of under the radar. There was one recently that the city raided because there weren't fire safety provisions in place, like the smoke alarms and the exits, and people were back the next day. How are SROs functioning in your neighborhood?
Well, that particular instance was in my ward, and I think we're still trying to figure out how we can make sure that housing is both affordable and safe and
Sometimes
quality.
it costs money to bring stuff up to code because you don't want people living in bad conditions. But then it costs money, you have to raise the rent, and it's hard to live there. That's one of the dilemmas that makes affordable housing complicated.
And I think in the case of a rooming house, we want to make sure that these rooming houses are assets to the neighborhood. You know, you're giving someone a special privilege to have lots and lots of people live in their building. You want to make sure that those folks are going to be really good neighbors and that they're doing a service to the whole block, you know, because they really are an exception.
So why did you vote no on the moratorium, Steve?
Like Alder Edwards, I did not really feel like it was absolutely necessary. And I feel like the board's attention, which is great, the task force is great. I think we're moving in this direction. The board's attention should be focused on how we can enable a wider range of affordable housing options. Moratorium, for me, doesn't do that. But I think, as Alder Clyburn said, you know, there are a lot of developments taking place that should increase property values for homeowners. And there's got to be creative ways to make sure that they can afford to stay where they are. So, you know, other cities are exploring things like accessory dwelling units, you know, granny flats, either within a building or behind a building. I think that could make a lot of sense for Newhallville because we have these long, narrow lots. You could have your main house and then rent out an affordable accessory dwelling unit to someone who lives behind your house.
That's interesting, granny units. And some people talk about micro houses. Have people have a house the size of a small apartment on some of those half lots in Newhallville. What do you think, folks?
It could work.
It could happen, Kevin. Now, also, there was a big vote about a new budget in the city. Tough, because we're in tough economic times despite this new building. It's not yet translating to lower taxes. Just to keep things going, we had to raise taxes 11%. Delphine and Kim, you voted yes for the budget. Steve, you voted no. Budgets are complicated. You can be for parts and other parts. Just because you vote yes or no doesn't mean you like everything in it or dislike. No. Oh, you voted no.
Yes.
So once again, Steve and Kim were part of the minority that voted no, and Delphine voted yes. So, folks, what were the reasons? Like, Delphine, why did you vote yes?
Well, I was different parts of the budget that I was after that I felt like we could work on our the 11%.
Mm-hmm.
And in meeting with our finance, our committee that has to do with our finance, I believe we're working on some things to make sure that 11% be brought down.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm believing in what we have been working on and the things that we have chosen on how we could do that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay, and Stephen Kim, why did you vote no?
I voted no. I know our finance committee and our board as a whole worked very hard in trying to get the budget right and not necessarily make any increases. And it is a tough job to do. And I could not vote yes on it after speaking to many of my constituents. It's a hard decision to make because there are some things you want to change that you can't necessarily.
And as
there's
Delphine
certain
mentioned,
numbers you can't
sometimes
play
like
with.
you get people to agree to make it better, then you decide, do I vote for something I've made better, or do I vote no against the whole thing if I'm not happy with it?
Exactly. So I chose to vote no against the whole thing because I was going to also vote no on the mill rate increase. And I could not vote yes to the budget and no to the mill rate increase, and they work hand in hand. So I voted no. And the board is still working to try to bring the number down, as Ms. Delphine said. So we are hoping we can.
Didn't end with the vote.
Exactly.
Steve Winter, why'd you vote no?
I think you're right that this budget is a continual process. There are amendments that can be made. I'm hopeful as well that we will find additional revenue. I felt like we needed to have more of a conversation about how we could save money in other places, and that's a difficult conversation to have. It's a challenging conversation to have, but a worthwhile one. Even if at the end of the day you don't end up cutting anything, at least you are more able to say to your residents, look, here's why, here's what the trade-off would have been. I would have been in favor of that. I think there are also positions that were cut or weren't added that could have brought in revenue. And
For example?
Transportation, traffic, and parking, the person does the meter bags. We've got to get somebody doing that again. Public Works, we've got Honda Smith doing public space enforcement for the entire city.
So every person you add actually brings in more money.
Yeah, so I think there's some cases where we can provide more services to residents, but also bring in more revenue. There's few and far between, but I think that
one position that got cut, this police department wanted a person to help deal with public information requests for new body camera footage. Cops now wear body cameras. So now if there's a controversy like this week when there was an arrest on the green of a homeless man, and activists who watched it said the police acted wrong. The police said they acted right. We got the video. You can watch it today on The Independent. I think you're going to see some pretty interesting repercussions on that before the day is out. But like departments across the country with these new cameras, the city doesn't have enough people to keep up with the requests. It's a lot of work. You got to make sure you're following the law and not releasing something private that you're not supposed to. There's a lot of footage to go through, a lot of people wanting it, but we just didn't have the money. You folks have all been concerned about police misconduct. Do you feel that it was wise to cut this position? It doesn't bring in revenue. That would help us have more scrutiny of public conduct. You just think that's something we couldn't afford?
I think it's something we couldn't afford at the time. And if you ask any of our residents, I think they would agree with the increase we just, passed. It can be something that can come up again. So it's not lost, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And you got your video, right?
Yeah, I think it's because I'm the media.
But we're good. As long as you got your video,
okay,
we'll fight to get everyone else's video. And
we got a deal. Thank you, Kim. I feel very honored now. I love, it's not too often I get to move the top of line in my life. What do you think, Steve? This has been a big issue for you for 10 years, 15 years.
Well, one of the amendments I proposed at the budget meeting was that there were 3 unfilled captains positions, 2 of which the police were trying to swap out, in part to free up funds for this body cameras position.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a 3rd unfilled captain's position that's been vacant for a couple years. And I thought, well, we maybe not remove that position entirely, but remove most of the funding to free up funds for other things like revenue generating positions or something like this for somebody to look through body camera stuff. I think that it is very important that the public have access to this data, that it's fundamental to the body camera program that the footage be accessible to the public.
Can you imagine if there had been footage of that raid on the Elevate nightclub that you were at? You remember 15 years ago started this whole discussion? I was talking to Chief Campbell today, and we were both amazed at this new video. Because if that video hadn't been there, he and I both felt we would have heard the police say this would happen, and that sounds convincing. And the witnesses, activists said this would happen, which is totally different. Said that sounds convincing. Gee, we have no way of knowing. And then you look, and it was clear as day what happened. It was interesting. We're in a new era, folks. So we're also in the new era in terms of hope. And I'll tell you why I'm very optimistic about New Haven these days is because thanks to Kim, because of Kim's work here, Kim Harris, the management team, for the first time in my lifetime, every neighborhood is getting together. The leaders of all 12 management teams are in the same room a lot. And they're in contact a lot because they're planning 2 months worth, 60 days, right, of 60 events in each neighborhood. And they're going to work together to tell everybody about it, family friendly, get them into each other's neighborhoods. And because of the smart strategy of Kim, going to the small businesses in each neighborhood, institutions, getting discounts so they can find who they are and begin working together ongoing so that we really are one city. You know, we talk about budgets, we talk about housing, we talk about zoning. I can't think of anything any more important than the kind of citizen involvement and commitment we see in Newhallville spreading citywide. Kim, can you tell me what's the latest with the One City project? I know we have our I think it's June 28th, we have our big unveiling of it with a fair that then gets the 60 days started. What's going on? So that's coming up.
Yes.
That's
okay.
3 weeks. Okay,
yes.
Less than 3 weeks.
So today we're meeting with Pierre Barber over at the transfer station to talk about how we can have more activism on recycling in New Haven.
And that's been a big national issue because it turns out China doesn't want the junk anymore. And people say this is recycling, but there's a lot of junk in it. China's not taking it anymore. And cities around the country can no longer recycle some of the stuff they have, and they're putting it in the landfills after all.
That's right. So we're looking for a trifecta here where we can go to Public Works, go over to AMR, and then go and take a tour of the transfer station all
so
in
now
one
what you're
day.
talking about is part of One City. In addition to having people go to the neighborhoods, you've been setting up this passport where
Yes.
people will get to go visit parts of town they never saw, grown-ups and their kids, whether it's a train station, whether it's the airport.
That's right.
They get shown around and see what's in their city.
Yes.
So you're talking about Middletown Avenue, which place
Yes.
nobody goes unless they have to.
That's right.
And that part of Middletown Avenue from Ferry Street over to I-91. And there you have our Public Works
Absolutely.
complex, and
Absolutely.
you have AMR, which is our ambulance network, and that's where we bring our recycling. You have the dump right nearby. So you're talking about part of One City, in addition to like fairs and stuff with the kids and eating Sundays and reading books in Newhallville and having concerts, actually having people go to
And
forgotten
that's
Middletown
right.
Avenue, find about how their garbage works.
Absolutely. Once again, another nugget in New Haven.
And then you're always thinking of the spinoff. Are you also going to teach them about how to recycle better?
Absolutely, because when we do it through our children, guess what? Parents will follow
Mm-hmm.
because then it becomes a tradition from the bottom up.
And some kids, especially boys, but not only boys, like looking at those big trucks. And everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely, they do. Absolutely. But here's the other big event that's coming up as well, Paul. On a week from today, after your show next week, we're having a press conference launch party. The mayor is throwing us a press conference launch party at City Hall at 1 o'clock. And you will get a chance to come out and see, sample, and savor what's about to happen this summer.
Yeah, because communication's a big part. So you built a website. That's called onecityinitiative.org, right?
Correct.
And that's where everyone's going to find out the information about what to do every day. That's going to be people's friend online this summer. Every day you got the kids, you don't know what to do, or you're just hanging out, you know what to do. You're going to go there and say, here's like 12 things I could do today.
Absolutely.
And get to know my city. But, you know, you still got to let people know this is happening.
Absolutely.
You're doing a good job in that. So partly you're going to have this press conference event next week.
Next week, and we're inviting, come on out, everybody. Just come. Just come. Show the press that you're interested in what's about to happen in your community this summer. Once again, 1 o'clock, City Hall. And we are hoping that all of our alders, all of the alders from all of the neighborhoods will be there in support of this.
Well, Kim Harris says they need to be there, so they really don't have a choice.
Oh.
They know there's hell to pay if they don't come, right?
I don't know about that, but
I wouldn't want to not show up when you told me you have to show up.
but just, come, and it would be nice for the alders to come because they get a chance to get a firsthand look at what's about to happen in their city this
And in
summer.
terms of communication, too, Alders are so often the front line of information. I've walked with Delphine up and down Winchester. People there sometimes find out stuff only because Delphine's told them. And that's part of what Alders do. Their newsletters, they're knocking on the doors, the texts. And you guys do a good job with that. All those newsletters you guys have and everything. And so you're going to be enlisting them and helping you with one city.
Absolutely. They're on board. They're actually. I love this group of Alders right here. I mean, they are in such alignment with moving Newhallville to the next level, and I so appreciate that because I've not seen that in who knows how long. So it's our Alders and the mayor and all the people that work for the mayor and the city. We're just grateful.
Well, Newhallville, you do work together.
Yes,
That's
we do.
been the story the last couple of years that you're not trying to spend citywide. I want to thank you for working together today here
Thank you.
on Dateline New Haven. Steve Winter, Delphine Clyburn, Kim Edwards, and Kim Harris, the brain trust and the work and trusted leadership in the Newhallville neighborhood.
Yes.
Thanks for telling us about one city and all the great things happening and all the challenges you're tackling in Newhallville. Thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It'd Feel to Be Free, and that's Stacey Phillips, who passed away this week, Grammy-winning dobro player, playing those lead notes you're hearing right there. It comes from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. Now, we know what it's like to be free, but what we got to do, Kim?
Hey, we got to book our ticket.
All right, and book your flight right here on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.